Good evening. We are reporting tonight on a collision between the branches of the American government that is arguably without precedent. We are witnessing a moment where political history and legal theory are crashing into one another in real time. As we speak, the machinery of the legislative branch and the machinery of the judicial branch are operating simultaneously, both directed squarely at the conduct of Donald Trump. To understand the magnitude of this situation, we have to look beyond the headlines and examine the structural mechanics at play. We are looking at a monumental convergence. On one track, you have the House of Representatives advancing specific, detailed articles of impeachment. On the parallel track, you have federal judges finding probable cause for criminal contempt. This isn't just a political disagreement or a campaign talking point. This is the Constitution's checks and balances system engaging its emergency brakes. We need to analyze exactly what is happening because the timeline is moving rapidly.
1 second, you're not there. And then, right on time, your neighbor is. Feel secure.
Donald Trump is effectively being squeezed by two distinct constitutional forces. Congress is pushing for his removal from office, while the federal judiciary is laying the groundwork for potential incarceration. It is a dual-pressure scenario that leaves very little room for political maneuvering. Let's begin by dissecting the situation in the House of Representatives. We need to look closely at House Resolution 353. This resolution was introduced by Representative Shri Thanadar on April 28, 2025. Now, in the world of parliamentary procedure, the specific designation of a bill matters immensely. This was filed as a privileged resolution. If you aren't familiar with that term, it is critical to understand why it changes the game. A privileged resolution is a legislative weapon that bypasses the usual gatekeepers. Typically, a bill must go through committees, and leadership can decide whether or not to schedule a vote. A privileged resolution cuts through that red tape. It allows the sponsor to force a floor vote without needing permission from the Speaker or the Rules Committee. It starts a countdown clock that leadership cannot easily turn off. On May 13, 2025, a notification was filed to trigger this mechanism, meaning a vote on these impeachment articles is not just a theoretical possibility, it is procedurally imminent. The resolution itself outlines 7 distinct articles of impeachment. We need to walk through these one by one because they paint a picture of the specific constitutional crisis the House is identifying. The first article centers on obstruction of justice and a breach of duty. This goes to the core of the presidential oath. The accusation here is that Donald Trump has failed to uphold the separation of powers and has actively impeded the administration of justice. It's an allegation that he has placed himself above the legal obligations that bind the office. The second article deals with the power of the purse. The Constitution is very clear. Congress, and Congress alone, possesses the authority to appropriate funds. The allegation in Article 2 is that Donald Trump has usurped this power, bypassing the legislative branch to spend money on personal or political priorities that Congress never authorized. This is a fundamental structural violation. The third article focuses on war powers. This is another area where the Constitution is explicit. The power to declare war rests with the legislature. The charge here is that Trump has ordered military strikes without seeking the necessary authorization, effectively attempting to seize the war-making power for the executive branch alone. Article 4 addresses the First Amendment. This article alleges a pattern of persecuting critics, attacking the free press, and retaliating against prosecutors and judges. The argument is that utilizing the power of the state to silence dissent violates the constitutional rights of citizens. The fifth article is somewhat unusual and highly technical. The creation of an unlawful office. The charge is that Donald Trump has established government positions and appointed personnel to them without congressional authorization. In the federal government, you cannot simply invent an office. It must be established by law. Doing otherwise is seen as a bypass of the Senate's advice and consent role. Article 6 covers bribery and corruption. This is the classic high crime and misdemeanor. It alleges that the power of the office was used for personal gain, which is the historical bedrock for impeachment proceedings going back to the founding of the Republic. However, it is the seventh article that stands out for its severity. The charge is tyranny. Now, we often hear that word thrown around in heated political debates, but in this context, it is being used as a formal institutional accusation. The article defines tyranny as the abuse of power for oppressive purposes and the intent to establish a system of oppression. The House is officially accusing Donald Trump of attempting to consolidate power in a way that subverts the checks and balances entirely. They are stating that his conduct demonstrates an intent to rule without constitutional restraint. While the legislative branch moves forward with those charges, the judicial branch is arguably posing a more immediate, tangible threat. This brings us to the courtroom of Judge James Boasberg. To understand what is happening here, we have to talk about the power of an injunction. An injunction is a court order that commands a party to do or refrain from doing specific acts. It is not a suggestion. It is the law. Judge Boasberg had issued a clear injunction prohibiting the deportation of asylum seekers. The order was unambiguous. Despite this legal command, the administration proceeded with deportations. They violated the direct order of a federal judge. When this was brought to Judge Boasberg's attention, he didn't just issue a warning. He reviewed the facts and found probable cause to hold the administration in criminal contempt. Let's take a moment to explain what probable cause means in this specific legal setting. It means the judge has seen enough evidence to believe that a crime, specifically the crime of contempt of court, has actually been committed. He set a deadline for the administration to correct this violation or face the consequences. This is where the situation becomes legally perilous for Donald Trump and his officials. We have to distinguish between civil contempt and criminal contempt because the difference determines the penalty. Civil contempt is designed to be coercive. If a judge finds an official in civil contempt, they are essentially saying, "I am going to fine you or put you in jail until you comply with my order." The judge holds the keys. The moment the official complies, the penalty stops. Judges can levy massive daily fines, $10,000, $100,000 a day, or order incarceration to force compliance. Crucially, a judge can do this directly from the bench. They do not need a prosecutor to initiate it. Criminal contempt is different. This is punitive. It is a punishment for the act of defiance itself, regardless of whether the person later complies. This involves a finding of guilt and a sentence, which can include prison time. Here is the strategic bottleneck for Donald Trump. As the head of the executive branch, he controls the Department of Justice. In a standard situation, he could theoretically prevent his own Justice Department from prosecuting his officials. However, judges have independent power regarding civil contempt. Donald Trump cannot use the DOJ to shield his officials from a judge who decides to jail them for defying a court order. The judiciary is an independent branch of government, and it has the inherent authority to enforce its own rulings. This specific case with Judge Boasberg is not an isolated incident. An analysis by the Washington Post indicates a broad pattern.
Jessica, what you doing?
You are the
The data suggests that Trump officials have been accused of ignoring roughly one-third of significant adverse court rulings. The methods vary. Sometimes it is delaying compliance, sometimes it is withholding evidence, and sometimes it is repackaging a blocked policy under a new name. But the result is the same: a systematic refusal to accept the authority of the courts. This is why the current moment is so volatile. We are seeing a perfect storm scenario. On one side, you have the House moving toward a vote on expulsion based on charges of tyranny and corruption. On the other side, you have federal judges who have lost patience and are preparing to use their ultimate powers of incarceration to enforce the rule of law. Donald Trump is finding himself in a position where the walls are closing in from both directions. He is facing the political death penalty, impeachment from Congress, and actual penalties involving fines or jail time from the courts. If the administration continues to defy Judge Boasberg and other judges who are watching this closely, we could see a scenario where executive branch officials are taken into custody for contempt. Imagine the optics and the constitutional weight of that reality. A president fighting removal in the Senate while his key subordinates are being jailed by federal judges for refusing to follow the law. This convergence of impeachment and contempt represents a stress test for the American system of government. The Constitution was designed specifically for this kind of conflict. It was built on the premise that if one branch attempts to accumulate too much power, the other branches have the tools to check that ambition. What we are watching tonight is that theory being put into practice. The machinery is in motion. The privileged resolution in the House has started the clock for a vote. The finding of probable cause in the court has started the clock for legal penalties. Donald Trump is caught in the middle of these grinding gears. The narrative that the executive branch can simply ignore the judiciary is being challenged, not with rhetoric, but with specific legal filings and court orders. The outcome of this dual confrontation will likely determine the balance of power in Washington for generations to come. We will remain vigilant as this develops, but make no mistake, we are in uncharted waters, and the storm is just beginning.
Our chasing cart helped us build a ceramics community from scratch.
Earn up to 5% cash back on business essentials.
If you have dementia or are afraid you might have it, you shouldn't drink warm water, and I'll explain why. Hardly any
Good afternoon, everybody. Seems like